Hey everyone, and welcome back to week 8 of the Great British Bake Off. Every week I'm taking on a new challenge from season 12 and I can't wait to see what we're doing this week as it's free from week, which is right up my alley as you know if you visited my channel before, I'm a dairy-free baker, so everything I bake is either dairy-free or vegan. Let's see what the challenge is for this week.
For your free from Showstopper challenge, the judges would like you to create a visually spectacular gluten-free celebration cake.
Okay, so for this week's challenge, I've decided to make a classic British dessert, which is the Victoria sponge, and I'm going to make a gluten-free and dairy-free version. And this is going to take a few steps as we're going to make a few different elements for it. So let's dive in and watch the process. Okay, so let's start by adding our sugar and our butter to our stand mixer. I'm using a vegan butter for this because I want to keep the recipe dairy free, and I'm just going to use the regular attachment for the stand mixer and mix that until it's nice and combined and it's light and fluffy, which will take a few minutes. Whilst that's mixing, let's get some advice from Prue on gluten-free considerations.
You can do all sorts of flours, but because they don't have gluten, they tend to make a cake that easily breaks apart. And it's quite a good idea to give it more solidity by adding quite a lot of eggs and butter.
So as Prue mentioned, we are going to be adding a lot of eggs to our cake batter just to make sure it retains that nice moisture and consistency that we would have in a traditional cake. So I'm going to be adding 5 in total. So you're just going to break each of them into your jug, and to that then we're going to add some flavouring. And as I'm making a traditional Victoria sponge, I'm actually going to add some vanilla bean paste to it just to give it that really nice pop of vanilla. So I'm adding about a teaspoon of that and then mixing that in with my eggs. And then we're going to start to slowly add those to the sugar and the butter mix. Now the reason you don't want to dump it all in at once is because cake batter tends to curdle when you do that. So by doing it a little at a time, you actually allow it to incorporate the ingredients better rather than it just turning into a huge sloppy mess, which can be quite off-putting if you're not used to making cakes. If that does happen though, I would always say don't worry, because once you start to add your dry ingredients, it will compensate for that excess moisture that's been added in one go. But it is more preferable to take your time and just add it a little bit at a time. It really doesn't take that long at all. You can see it's quite runny now at this stage, so I always suggest you give the bowl a scrape down with your spatula just to make sure you haven't missed anything at the bottom of the stand mixer. And now I'm going to add my gluten-free flour. Now for this recipe they actually suggested that you use a self-raising flour, and I actually couldn't find an off-the-shelf gluten-free self-raising flour, so I decided to make one myself. I'll pop the link in the description of the video for you so you can check out how to make that yourself. It's really easy, and I'm actually using a 1-for-1 flour mix from Bob Mills, which means that you don't have to add any of those extra additives to your flour to make it have all of the properties that regular flour would have, just to kind of replicate that gluten. So once you've got all your flour added in, again you want to scrape down your bowl, make sure everything is combined. That looks great, and now we're ready to pop it in our pans. So this recipe is actually going to make a nice size 2-tier cake, and it's using 8-inch cake pans or 20 centimeters. And the first thing you want to do is grease them and line them, because we want to make sure that cake is easy to release once it's baked and has come out of the oven. So you'll see that I've started off with a circle of parchment on the bottom of the pan, and then I'm just going around and adding some parchment to the side as well. That's a complete preference of mine. I just prefer to do that way. If you're only going to do one of those things, I would always recommend that you line the bottom of the pan. That is the most important thing to make sure it doesn't stick. Okay, perfect. So our 2 pans are done. Now it's just a case of adding our cake batter to them. And as you can see, I'm just using a cup measure to roughly gauge how much is in each pan. Because we're making a 2-tier cake, you do want it to be fairly even. You could be even more precise if you wanted to and actually weigh them to make sure they weigh the same amount. I just kind of eyeball it, and I think at the end of the day it doesn't really matter as long as you're quite close to it. Then I'm just using my spatula to push that batter out to the edges of the pan, and I find it's easier if you actually turn the pan when you do this as well, so you're not breaking your wrist or anything like that, and it just seems to flow a little bit easier if you spin it when you're doing it. Just anything to make your life easier when you're getting that cake batter into position. Okay, so let's make sure we've got those last bits from our mixing bowl. This looks great. Then what I'm going to do is give them a quick wrap on the counter, and that's just to remove any air bubbles. You want to try and get those to the surface, as air will actually rise when it's baking in the oven and may cause just some air pockets in the cake otherwise. So it's always preferable to do that. And then I'm just using an offset spatula to straighten off that batter. And there we go. So you can now go ahead and pop it in our oven, which is preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 180 degrees Celsius. You just want to put them on the same shelf, roughly in the middle, and then we're going to bake it for 25 to 30 minutes until they are golden brown.
Cake should be ready.
So let's go ahead and check our cakes to see if they're done. They do look as if they have a nice golden color, which is what we're hoping for. They also do feel nice and firm when I touch them, so there's no looseness there in the cake batter. They look nice and firm, and also they smell great too. So that's generally the signs that I'm looking for, is the touch, the smell, and also if you put a cake tester in them, they should come out clean. If you have any loose batter on that cake tester, you need to pop it back in the oven, and at this stage I would probably do that for 5 minutes. But these cakes are absolutely perfect, beautiful color, so we can take them out. And I'm just going to leave them on our cooling tray for 10 minutes, and then we're going to actually come back and turn them out onto wire racks to cool completely. And the trick when you're dealing with cakes of this size is to make sure you use one cooling rack per cake. And as you can see, because they're cool enough for me to handle now, I'm not going to burn myself on the tins. So you just want to take them one at a time, flip them over onto the cooling rack. I always remove the side parchment pieces, and then we're going to leave them to cool completely. Okay, so let's talk about the fillings that we're going to use in our Victoria sponge. Now traditionally it would be filled with strawberry jam and whipped cream or whipping cream. And for this, to make it dairy free, I'm actually going to make a coconut whipped cream instead. Now I'm using coconut milk for this, and you might be wondering why my coconut milk isn't liquid. So there's actually a trick that you can turn it into a cream by popping your can in the fridge overnight, so that the milk will actually solidify and all the water from it, that's the coconut water, will stay at the bottom of the can. It's a really cheap and easy way of making a non-dairy cream. And all you do, as you saw me do there, is scoop it out of the can, leave the liquid in there, which you could use for something else like smoothies, and then go ahead, add it to your mixing bowl and just start whipping it with your whisk attachment. Now my cream is still cold at this stage too, which will help stabilize it. And what we're also going to do is add some icing sugar to it, just to thicken it up a little bit and also add some extra sweetness to it. If you are going to make this for your cake, just bear in mind that it will taste of coconut, because that is the predominant ingredient for this cream as well. And there's a couple of things you can do for that. You can add more icing sugar for sweetness. You can add a little bit of salt to it if you just want to just hone that flavor down a little bit too. Or you can go ahead and add some flavoring to it. And I'm going to add one of my favorite flavorings, which you'll see me use in a lot of my videos, which is vanilla bean paste, which is a perfect complement for this cake as well. You'll see I added a little bit more icing sugar as well, just to help with that stability. And then you want to whip it for a couple of minutes until it looks like this. And that's your coconut whipped cream done. Really nice and easy to make. So finally we can put all the elements of our cake together. You want to make sure you take that bottom piece of parchment off, pop it on your chosen plate that you'll be serving it on, and then the first thing I'm doing is adding my strawberry jam. Now this is a thin strawberry jam, so you just want to make sure that you spread it all the way to the edge of the cake. If a little bit runs off the side, don't worry, that's all part of the appeal of a Victoria sponge cake. You'll also notice I'm using a Lazy Susan here, which is a really helpful tip when you are working with cakes, because you can actually spin that again just to cut down on the awkwardness of your arms when you're trying to reach around all the sides of the cake. Then we're just spreading on some of our coconut cream. Now it actually made more than we need, so that's great. You can use the remainder for something else. And again, make sure you go all the way to the edge. As you can see, I'm using an offset spatula just to spread it out nice and evenly. And then you pop your top layer on. Now you'll notice that you can see the cream and the jam starting to come out the sides, and that is typically what a Victoria sponge looks like. We are going to add some final touches to it though. You just want to grab a small sieve and some icing sugar and sprinkle it on top to finish it off. And that's our gluten-free and dairy-free Victoria sponge cake finished. I can't wait to try it and see how it compares to a regular cake. Okay, so our cake is finally finished. It's been a little bit of a process and I can't wait to dive in and see what it tastes like. So this is the first time that I've ever made a gluten-free cake. All my bakes are always dairy-free anyways, by just swapping out my butter. But this is the first time that I've used a 1-for-1 gluten-free flour in cake, so I'm interested to see what difference that's made. It looks very similar to a regular cake. It's got a nice crumb to it. Nice and spongy as well, so now let's try it. It's very good, very similar to what I remember from growing up in the UK, and I think it turned out really well. So being able to modify it to make it dairy free with using that coconut cream instead of regular cream for the filling was great as well. And let me know what you think, if you've ever heard of a Victoria sponge before, and if you're going to have a go at trying to make one yourself as well. As always, the recipe link from the Bake Off is in the descriptions, and don't forget to like and comment on this video as well. I love to see and hear your thoughts, and also if you'd like to contribute to my ingredient fund and help support my channel, don't forget that you can always click on the Buy Me a Coffee link in my video description as well. Thanks so much for watching. Next week is down to the final 4 of the Bake Off. We're almost at the end and I can't wait to see who wins. So make sure you check back and see what we're going to make next time. Thanks for watching.